the dark yendi of the soldier who pierced Jesus on the cross. It was a dark Friday in Jerusalem. The clouds were gathering over Golgotha, anticipating the moment that would split history in two. At the foot of the three crosses, a Roman centurion was carrying out an order to execute another crucifixion, this time of Jesus of Nazareth. His duty was clear, to ensure death, and so he did. When the 6th hour came, there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour, and at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Then Jesus, giving a great shout, expired suddenly. The veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the centurion who was standing in front of him said, "Truly this man was the Son of God." That day the fate of this Roman soldier changed forever. The one responsible for overseeing the death of Jesus was shaken to his very core. He went from being an executive to a witness, from one who pierced Jesus' body with a spear to the first Gentile to believe that he is the Son of God. He renounced his high position in the most powerful empire on earth and joined the followers of Jesus. He took his message to distant lands, proclaiming the gospel with the passion of one who had seen it all and had been transformed, but his terrible end was marked in the history of the church under his name, Longinus, before that dark Friday. Longinus was a Roman centurion. Centurions were the leaders of legions with more than 100 men under their command. They were officers highly respected for their discipline, valor, and effectiveness on the battlefield. His life was marked by harshness, violence, and blind obedience to Rome. He had witnessed death without flinching, executed orders without hesitation, and become an instrument of the empire. Until that day, the city was not yet fully awake, but hurried footsteps, hushed voices, and a name that whispered among shadows could be heard: Jesus of Nazareth. The night before, he had been arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, was betrayed with a kiss by one of his own, Judas Iscariot, in exchange for 30 silver coins. He was brought before the Sanhedrin, the council of the chief priests, who accused him of blasphemy for declaring himself the Son of God. There they struck him, spat on him, and condemned him, but they had no power to execute him, for that they needed the authorization of Rome, and so at dawn they brought him before Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea. Pilate, seated on the tribunal, looked at Jesus with curiosity and asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus calmly replied, "You say so." The chief priests and elders accused him, but Jesus remained silent. Pilate, bewildered, leaned towards him and said, "Do you hear what they are saying against you? Aren't you going to defend yourself?" Jesus did not respond with a single word. He neither justified himself nor defended himself. Pilate was astonished. He had seen criminals beg, lie, and weep to save their lives, but this man had an overwhelming calm. Then a messenger quickly approached the tribunal. It was an urgent message from his wife saying, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much today in a dream because of him." Pilate shifted uneasily in his seat. He felt that something greater than himself was occurring, and he could not stop it. It was customary to release a prisoner during Passover, and Pilate believed he found an escape. He offered the crowd a choice between Jesus, called the Christ, and Barabbas, a known criminal and murderer, but the priests and religious leaders incited the crowd to shout with hatred, "Barabbas!" Pilate raised his hands and asked, "What then shall I do with Jesus?" The crowd roared with fury. "Crucify him." Pilate uneasily asked once more, "Why, what wrong has he done?" But the response was more brutal than before. "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Seeing that he could do nothing against this tide of rage, Pilate took a basin of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of the blood of this righteous man. It is on you." Then Pilate released Barabbas and handed Jesus over to be crucified. The fate of the Son of God was sealed. The soldiers took Jesus to the praetorium. Centurion Longinus, as always, stood firm by the entrance. He had supervised dozens of punishments and seen many men die, but that day something was different. The prisoner before them offered no resistance, did not scream, did not curse, and did not beg. He bore each blow as if knowing it was necessary. The cruel soldiers, for their amusement, stripped him of his clothes, bound him tightly to the pillar, and began to flog him brutally. The whip fell again and again mercilessly, yet he did not cry out. Longinus watched, arms crossed, his face carved by years of violence, but something in his eyes began to change. The other soldiers mocked him, placing a purple cloak over his shoulders, weaving a crown of thorns, and pressing it into his head. Blood covered his face, but his eyes remained open, fixed and serene. They put a staff in his hands as if it were a scepter, knelt before him and laughed. "Hail, King of the Jews!" Longinus did not join in their mockery. He felt discomfort for the first time in years, not because of the violence, but because of the dignity of that beaten man, spit upon and struck on the head repeatedly with the staff. And when they tired of their game, they tore off the purple robe, dressed him again in his own clothes, and prepared him for crucifixion. But Longinus could not look away. Something within him, still slumbering, began to stir. He did not understand why that man did not defend himself. He did not understand why there was no hate on his face amidst humiliation, only deep compassion. He began to question who this man really was. He still did not know, but he would soon, because that day Longinus would witness the greatest act of love the world had ever known, and his life would never be the same. The soldiers took Jesus, pushed him out of the praetorium, and placed a rough, heavy cross on his shoulders. Already stained by the history of other condemned men, the path to Golgotha had begun. Centurion Longinus led the way, opening a path through the crowd. It was his duty to escort the prisoner to the place of crucifixion. Golgotha, the hill of skulls where those whom Rome wished to forget died. Jesus moved forward amidst shoves and shouts. Some spat at him, others insulted him, but there were also those who wept silently in the midst of the crowd. His mother, Mary, desperately searched for him with her eyes. She could not see him, so she asked the disciple John, "John, help me bring me to my son." Both pushed through the crowd, and then a soldier shoved Jesus forcefully. His exhausted body collapsed against the stones. It was his first fall. The soldiers flogged him again, shouting, "Get up." And with effort, Jesus, Mary, and John managed to approach just as Jesus fell a second time. Mary could not contain herself and rushed to him, kneeling beside him with trembling hands and eyes full of anguish. She whispered, brokenly, "I am here." Jesus lifted his bloodied face and responded, "Behold, Mother, I make all things new." It was not a comforting phrase, but a living prophecy of what was about to happen. The weight of the cross crushed his wounded back. His body began to give way, and Jesus fell again. The soldiers struck him to rise, but his knees no longer obeyed. Longinus observed him. He had seen men broken before, but Jesus was not defeated. There was something in him that remained unbroken. Then the centurion. Longinus took a man from the fields who happened by and ordered, "You take the cross." Jesus slowly raised his eyes, meeting those of the man, and though weary, he gave a look of gratitude. The procession continued while Simon helped Jesus carry the cross. The streets were witnesses to a procession of death. Women wept for the bleeding, weary Jesus. He turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children." Longinus heard these words, and his soul trembled once more. Who was this man that, on the brink of collapse, thought of others? Something in him told him that death was not the end. Before continuing with the video, I must address a very important and delicate topic. I am talking about the excessive consumption of pornography by Christians. This practice has been increasing significantly in recent years, and it seems there is no solution in sight because it is a delicate subject few people speak about. That is why we developed the method. The end of imprisonment. With it, you will have a daily plan of closeness to God, a complete material that includes strategies for digital protection and mental renewal designed to help you restore your spiritual connection with God and eliminate once and for all that feeling of guilt you experience when consuming this type of content. If you are interested in transforming your relationship with God, click now on the first pinned comment and take your first step. For days afterward, peace saluted Longinus. The images of Golgotha haunted him like a sacred fire. He remembered every word of Jesus, every look, every silence. As the world returned to its routine, he could not return to his. He could not continue being the relentless centurion he had been for years. His heart, hardened by iron and blood, began to crack when he heard that some claimed to have seen Jesus alive. He was not surprised. He felt no skepticism nor confusion, only a calm and powerful confirmation. Yes, it was true. Jesus had conquered death. For the first time, Longinus began to understand what faith meant. He first grasped the real weight of the cross, the value of forgiveness, and the immense power of redemption. Finally comprehending, Longinus resigned from his post, removed his armor, and returned his sword, and without looking back, he abandoned the Roman army to begin his journey of faith. He joined the disciples, sought out those who had known Jesus, and began to learn about the one he had once executed. His name, Longinus, began to circulating among the first believers was a Roman centurion who had once commanded men in the name of the empire, but now walked barefoot with a heart ablaze, preaching about a king whom he had once helped to crucify. "I saw him die," he would say, "but in his death I discovered life." His testimony was powerful. He spoke not from theories or rumors but from first-hand experience, and his story moved hearts. The one who once wielded the sword now raised the word of the gospel with bravery in Cappadocia and Caesarea in modern-day Turkey. Longinus proclaimed the gospel, and many believed because he was no ordinary preacher. He was the centurion who had stood at the foot of the cross, but Rome forgives not those who stray from its authority, and thus he was persecuted. Longinus was arrested, interrogated, beaten, and threatened with death on the condition of denying Christ. But Longinus, with the peace of one who has found the truth, responded with his faith, and was thus condemned by the same empire that had trained him as a soldier would now execute him as a traitor. They took him to the outskirts of the city, and there, on a desolate hill, he was beheaded. Longinus died as a martyr, not in fear but with eyes uplifted like the one he had seen raise his gaze on the cross and say, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." His body was buried in the region of Cappadocia, and soon the local Christians began to venerate him as a saint. Many claimed that his tomb was a place of miracles and healing, and his name began to be remembered not as an executioner, but as a witness, a believer, and a martyr. Thus, through the centuries, the Church recognized him as a saint, Saint Longinus, the one who saw, believed, and died for the one who first died for him. But he was not the only one, you must know. The story of Peter, John, James, Andrew, Philip, Thomas, Bartholomew, Matthew, Simon, Thaddeus, and the other James from the streets of Jerusalem to the far reaches of the earth. These 12 men would carry a message that would challenge kings, topple temples, and split history in two. They had no armies, no swords, no political alliances, only the faith in what they had seen and their word. You must watch the video that appears on screen, the movie about the apostles. This is not just the history of the Church. It is the story of how 12 men defied the most powerful empire in history and conquered the world with nothing but their faith and what they sacrificed to achieve it.